Okay, so I guess, yeah, we'll get started. Um, First of all, hi everyone. My name is Jon Kent, and I'm going to talk to you today about hybrid working. My background is in software development and building teams, and I now run a company called In the Office, which helps teams coordinate when they go into the office and when they work from home, as well as help managers make better decisions about the future of the office. So I thought I'd talk to you today about some lessons and trends that we've seen over the last couple of years, as well as what to focus on now. So if you're in the wrong talk, now's the time to go. Nope. Good. Okay, so starting off with a retrospective over the last couple of years, I think it's very clear, and I don't think anyone will argue with me, that we've basically been working in crisis mode. That's kind of what we're getting from all of our customers. It's been a couple of years where we haven't really known what to do since the pandemic started. This has been a huge shift, and what we're trying to do and what leaders are trying to do is to direct us through that issue. So what we've seen a lot of is managers and leaders setting policies, hard and fast policies, everything ranging from going fully remote to saying you've got to be back in the office 5 days a week. And while this is really good in a crisis, because that's what people need, they need direction and they need to know what's expected of them, there are some drawbacks for that, and that's that it creates very much polarization between the people that agree with what the decisions are being made and the ones that say, actually, that's not quite how I feel. And what that's also created is an atmosphere of probably selfishness is a bit of a strong word for it, but we've seen a lot of employees saying this isn't the right way we want to work, so we're going to threaten you with leaving. And that's what we sort of want to avoid as we go back into business as usual. So that's the sort of trend that we've seen, obviously, from the hybrid working perspective. We've also seen trends to do with technology. So during the pandemic, obviously, there was a huge rush to adopt loads of new technology across the companies. Again, we're sort of working in survival mode, so it's just let's adopt something that will help us get through this. And the drawbacks now that we're seeing is that there's an element of sort of apathy, if you like, where people are going, well, we don't want to start using new software because we've already got all of this other stuff that we're not using, as well as a bit more of decision by committee, which I'll come on to later, and why that's not necessarily the best way to go forwards when you're looking at technology. And the last thing, before we stop looking at what's happened in the past, is data. So I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's been a huge push for more and more data. And while that's a good thing, we want to be doing data-driven decisions, it's the validity and the usefulness of that depends on how we actually read the data. So we need to consider that when you're making decisions about hybrid working going forwards. So that's what's happened in the past. We have been working in more of a crisis mode, and what we want to be trying to do now is shifting our mindset away from crisis and where we're curing symptoms. We see a problem and we're just trying to solve that initial problem, and we want to move more towards experimentation, where we can identify and uncover that root problem that we're trying to solve. And the only way to really do that is by doing experimentation. So, I don't know, is anyone here working in a tech company? So none of you, well, maybe some of you, will recognize this icon, which is all about agile software development. And the idea behind it is that you identify a problem, you break it down into the smallest problem that you can, and then you come up with a solution, see if it works. If it does, keep it, great. If not, throw it away, start again. But trying to get these small cycles of experimentation to try to actually solve the much bigger problem of hybrid working. So I've jumped ahead of my notes now. No, there we go. So I guess you won't get a talk about hybrid working without talking about the main thing, which is the office. It's been quite interesting seeing the way that people have been talking about the office over the last couple of years. There has been an element of elevating it to this almost regal state where people are trying to protect the office as an entity. And the main ones that the main people that the media have been covering that come to mind are people like Elon Musk, that said last year, if you don't come into the office, then basically I'm saying you've resigned. That's possibly not the best way to firstly treat people, but also it's thinking of the office as something that it's not really designed to be. So if you just took an empty office, the office doesn't actually create any value for the company as if it's empty. If no one uses it, there's zero value that it creates. It's just a cost center. So really, the office isn't something that needs to be protected. It's just a productivity tool that people use, that the end user is the employee that goes into the office, and it's them that then create the value for the company. So when people are talking about setting new hybrid policies or anything like that, always try to start from the position of the office is actually just a productivity tool for people to use so that they can get their job done in a more productive way. And when you start to think about that, you realize that actually it's not just the office that's that productivity tool, it's all workspaces. So when someone's working from home, they're using a workspace which is at home, which for them at that point in time, they think is hopefully the most productive place for them to work. So with that in mind, you then need to think about what the end user needs and what their requirements are for where they work. And we do this a lot in product management, where you're always focusing on the end user. So what I've tried to identify is the sort of 3 core priorities that happen in everyone's minds as to where the best place for them to work is. Of course, that all starts out with things like team requirements. So when you're thinking about what someone needs, where someone should work and where the most productive place for them to work is, what do their team need in terms of collaboration? What about the other team members? Do they have junior team members who need mentoring? Do they check my notes? Yeah. Do they need a place where they can all collaborate together? But also, when you're thinking about team requirements, think about the bigger team. So a company is just a large team. So what does the company need in terms of culture and in terms of its greater purpose? So these are priorities that you need to consider when thinking about the best place for someone to work. You also need to consider the tasks that they're performing. So are they doing something that requires deep thinking, or are they doing something that requires collaboration? Are they, keep jumping ahead because I'm so excited. Do they use technology, which means that they have to work in a certain place? If you've got lab technicians, they need to be in a lab, which is a centralized place. They can't really do that from a remote location. Whereas, now we can do a lot more with laptops and Wi-Fi. So the task that you're performing should also dictate where you should be working. And then lastly, and this is the one that's sort of come up the most since the pandemic, is the personal circumstances of everyone. So what are people's personal circumstances? Do they have people at home that they need to care for? Do they have a young family that they want to see? Or a slightly older, teenage family that they don't want to see? Do they have a good home setup? All of these things are the personal circumstances, which again is another priority that needs to be considered when trying to find the best place to work. And the most fun part about this, and why hybrid is actually really difficult to manage, is that these 3 priorities change continually. They change based on all of these 3 things. So it won't be the same every day, and it won't be the same for every person. What we're trying to do with these experiments is try to identify what that best place is the majority of time, but also try to set up a system that's flexible enough to cope when each of these priorities might change either permanently or temporarily. So hopefully it's not too overwhelming, but that's the sort of thing that we're trying to create. We're trying to create a flexible system that will work for everyone. And don't assume as well that one priority means something. So it means either in the office or remote. You could have someone who's the task that they're performing requires deep thinking, so automatically you think they need to be at home. But because they've got a young family and a bad home setup, they actually need the office. So in that case, the office is definitely a productivity tool that they need to have access to so that they can perform their task. So what we need in order to try to solve this problem is we need to start from the ground. We need to come up with an experimentation framework for each of your companies. And it's going to be different for all of you. There's no one-size-fits-all rule for this. And actually, if you've got a hybrid policy that seems to be working, great, well done. If you find that it's not quite working and you're getting pushback, then this is a good way to sort of try to start getting along that journey. And of course, the three things that you need to focus on are communication. You really need everyone to be on board with this experimentation framework. When you're experimenting and you're trying to be innovative, you have to have an area of psychological safety. There has to be a zero blame culture, which is one of the hardest things we've seen over the last couple of years. And also you need to use and embed the tools that allow you to be flexible. So if we just look at those in a bit more detail, communication really, more is more. And I'm not talking about, moving that hour-long company meeting at the end of the week to be a full day every week or anything like that. Try and think of other ways that you can communicate and tools that you can use to communicate and signpost your intentions so that people know what's going on. During the crisis mode, it was very much dictating what's going to happen so that people can, they know what's expected of them, which is fine in crisis mode. But when you're going back to business as usual, people need to be informed of what's happening and need to be part of the conversation. You need to, when you're planning your experiments, you need to let people know what you're trying to achieve with this, why you're doing the experiment, and what you're hoping the outcome will be, so that they're along for the journey and actually then engage with the experiment. So remember, when we're in crisis, it's dictating. Now we need to be more business as usual and more informing. Psychological safety, as I said, this is a really big one since the pandemic hit, and because of the crisis mode that we've been in, that has created more of a them and us attitude with a lot of employees, and it's quite difficult to then try to get back to an area where you are free to experiment and be wrong about things. You're looking for that zero blame culture. And the best way to do that is through empathy, which obviously is a really hot topic on LinkedIn at the moment. And what that requires is empathy towards the employees, trying to understand the struggles that they're going through and trying to listen to them when, if you're saying you need people in at a certain number of days in the week and someone's struggling to do that or refusing to do that, don't just try and force it upon them, try and understand why. What's going on with those three things, those three priorities I showed you earlier, which is meaning they're pushing back. But also, and this is the really hard one, and if you work out a way to do it, let me know, because that'd be really useful. But the employees need to be more empathetic towards the leaders as well. This is where, when a leader's saying, we want to do some experiments, we want to try and work out what's going on, if they try an experiment and it doesn't work and the employees turn around and say, told you so, that's going to kill any future employees, hopefully it won't kill the employees, it'll kill any future experimentation, and we'll just go back to dictating and back to more of that crisis mode. So empathy really is a two-way street. You need to make sure that everyone's engaged with it. And it is linked to comms. If you bring people along on the journey and say what we're going to try and do is experiment, and individual teams can experiment between them to find out what cadence of office attendance or how they use the office, that's really the best way to make sure that everyone's using the productivity tool in the best way. So remember, psychological safety, we should all be allowed to try and fail and not be blamed. Tools. So this is actually quite a big topic at the moment. It's related to the adoption of so much technology during the pandemic. But the tools really are anything hardware and anything software. So hardware includes the office and your workspace. What we need to be doing in order to provide the best tools to actually go forwards is identify the root problem that everyone's struggling with. So there's an expression that happens a lot in product management, which is people don't want an 8mm hole. People don't want an 8mm. It's a really good expression. I can't wait to get it out. People really want. Try again. people don't want an 8mm drill bit, they want to drill an 8mm hole. That's an expression trying to get you to solve the root problem. But that is also quite a superficial problem that you've uncovered. What you need to do is try and use different tools to come up with the root problem. So people don't actually want the 8mm hole, they want to hang some shelves. So why do they want to hang shelves? Well, they want to put books on them. Why do they want to put books on them? Because they're cluttering up their desk. Why is it cluttering up their desk? Well, because they've read them and finished them, so they want to get rid of them. And it's only when you go those extra steps that you really uncover those core problems that people are experiencing. So really, people don't want an 8mm drill bit, they want to take their books to a charity shop. That's the problem that you're trying to solve. So you really need to uncover those things when you're looking at the hardware and the software that you're acquiring for the business. The end user, as I said, the people that are using the software, the people that are using the office, I'm just getting really excited by it. The people that are using the office, the end users, are the employees. They're the ones who have the problem of the jobs that they're trying to do, and the office is a productivity tool to help them do that. So make sure you concentrate on what the end user's problems are, not what you might perceive the end user's problems to be. So what we've seen over the last couple of years is a lot of people who aren't experiencing the actual problem going out and buying the software and then being confused when the end users aren't using it. So an example would be, if a facilities manager says we need to know what's happening with the office, so I'm going to put something simple like an Excel spreadsheet that people need to fill in when they're coming into the office. Now, you might think that the facilities manager is the one with the problem. Yes, they're the one trying to understand what's going on with the office, but the problem is that the end user is not getting any value from filling out that form. It's an extra task that they're having to do, so you're creating friction in them actually using the tool that's been picked to solve the facilities manager problem. So make sure that you consider that when you're trying to buy software or roll out hardware, that if the end user doesn't see the value in it, you're going to come up against a lot of friction when trying to adopt it. And lastly is flexibility, and this really is key for experimenting as well. Both in hardware and software, the key indicators of a flexible hardware or software really are the length of contract and the onboarding process. So if you're looking at an office space and the length of contract is 10 years, that's going to be very difficult to get out of should your priorities change and should you need to rejig the amount of space that you've got. Similarly, with the onboarding time, if you have to get a large office and you have to spend 6 months to a year fitting it out, when things change, unless you've fitted it out specifically to be flexible, you're actually not going to be able to use this experimentation framework to try to get things done quickly. And it's the same with software. So traditionally B2B software is usually like a year's contract to 2 years contract and about 6 months of onboarding. Now if you've got a problem today and you found something that you think is going to solve it, but it takes 6 months before you can even put it in front of a user, by the time they actually use it, the problem's going to have moved on. So key things for flexibility, look at the length of contract and the onboarding time. Data is something I mentioned earlier, and it really is key at the moment. This is what everyone seems to be looking for, is more and more data, and there is data everywhere. So it usually comes down to things like surveys or someone who's been studying hybrid working during the crisis time who are presenting this data. And the problem that you need to be aware of is with data, if you read it incorrectly, you can draw completely incorrect insights, which can have lasting effects within your company. So just as a sort of little example, I thought I'd show you a graph of data that shows the layoffs in technology companies since the pandemic. So looking at that, first of all, you sort of go, that's a lot of people. That's shameful, isn't it? It's they've just got rid of so many people. It's really not. Yeah, it's not the best. If I was in a technology company, I'd be very worried now. I mean, if I was making a decision about the offices for these people as well, I'd be going, right, well, they've lost literally tens of thousands of people, so we must reduce the office space because, we've lost so many people. As a technology company, I might be looking at that going, actually, that's quite good news for me. It means the market's going to be flooded with lots of people looking for new jobs. So that's great because it means we'll find higher caliber people. We'll probably not have to pay them through the nose as we've had to. So looking at that, the insights you draw, depending on your perspective, could be really positive or could be negative. But looking at that, it seems fairly cut and dry, doesn't it? But if we then look at things like the hiring during the pandemic, you can see that actually the post-pandemic layoffs are nothing compared to how many people they've hired. So suddenly all of the insights that I thought I was drawing and making decisions off are completely incorrect. So the key with data is we need to try to be slightly more scientific and look at the data that you've got and go, if I was coming from the other point of view, what data would I need to disprove what I've just been told? And it's only by really looking at both sides and trying to not get flooded with your own unconscious bias of going, I've found data which proves that I'm right, so therefore I'm going to present this as fact. You really need to look at as many sides as you can. There was a sort of similar thing to this. There was a study in the US a couple of years ago where they showed a presentation about a political party to members of that political party and members of the opposition. And the point was to try to prove if people had unconscious bias. And what they found was that people in both camps found that presentation backed up their own theories about what was going on. So you can see a string of data and you can draw your insights, but someone on the other side might use that same data to back up their argument. So we really need to try to get as much data as we can, but also think and plan when you're doing these experiments and think about what data you actually need to prove your point and get other people to look at the data and see if they can say, you know what, that's not true, that's proving my point. Just briefly, I want to sort of talk about, because it's all very nice and to talk about this in the abstract, but a live example that I came across this year of people sort of using all of these tools and trying to use all of these tools, but actually coming up with the wrong decisions, was a company I met last year. They're a 100-person company. Before the pandemic, they had a really, really nice office. Everyone was going in. It seemed brilliant. During the pandemic, like everyone else, they went into lockdown, so went fully remote. And then as they started to come back, the bosses tried to take less of a mandatory, we want people in definitely 2 days a week. They said, we'd expect for you to be in 2 days a week. That's what we think would be good for the company culture. But really, you can do what you want. We want to gather some data and then make a decision about the office after that. So the IT and the facilities manager went off and bought some desk booking software, which seems about right. You want to manage the office, so they bought desk booking software and ran an experiment where when the data came through, they said they were quite shocked because it showed that on average only 10% of people wanted to use the office. That was the data that was coming back to them. So, obviously with the peaks and troughs, usually, the Wednesday being the busiest day, as everyone knows, and empty on Monday and Fridays. It's not always the case, by the way. I do have a client where Friday is their busiest day in the office. But armed with that data, they made a decision, they shut down that office and they moved to a 20-person office, thinking, we don't want to go 10%, that's quite small, so we'll go 20%. And it's the first day in, they realised it was absolute chaos because everyone wanted to come in the office. And the reason that they didn't have that data was because it was software that was designed to solve the facilities manager's problem, which was how's the office being used? And no one was using it because before that, they all had dedicated desks. So why would you go in and book in a desk when you know that it's going to be there? So what the company then had to do was put in a policy that limited the number of days you could go into the office because they'd just signed up for a lease which was inflexible. So I mean, this really is a worst case scenario. You're not only having to dictate a policy that everyone has to abide by, but you're restricting people that want to use a tool to make them more productive because you haven't made it available to them. So had they thought about the way that they need to collect the data, had they thought about the software and the hardware that they were using, they might have come to a different decision. But as I said, it's a no-blame culture, so even though I named the two people that chose the software, hopefully it's just that was a mistake, how can we learn and move on? One of the last things I wanted to talk about is benefits. So this is obviously a way that lots of people are trying to create a pull for people to come back into the office. I think, generally benefits are great. It'd be really nice to go into an office which has, basic things like tea and coffee, but also things like puppy play dates where, if you want, by the way, 100% capacity in your office, have a puppy play date, everyone will come in. But I wanted to bring this up because I was on a panel last week where there was an employment lawyer who said, just as a sort of a gentle warning of how we're not all the same and everyone has different circumstances. There has been a rise recently in employment tribunal cases because a benefit that might be given out for one person, say a Tuesday team lunch or something like that, could actually be discriminatory against someone else because they can't get in to be part of that lunch or they can't take part of that benefit. So it's a bit abstract, but I just wanted to share that when you are thinking about the experiments, make sure you're thinking about how this affects everyone, because apparently employment tribunals are now easier to get to, and because we've been in that crisis mode where there is that sort of them and us and almost a distrust of what people are doing, you don't want to end up doing that over something which was intended with the best of intentions. That's pretty much what I wanted to talk to you about. I guess the main sort of takeaways are, if you can, try to move towards that sort of experimentation mindset. Try to get away from the crisis mindset of just solving the symptoms. Try and uncover the main root problem. So if people are refusing to come back into the office, what's their main reason why they're not coming into the office? Try and have some empathy to understand what they're going through so that we can actually come up with a system that works for everyone. And the best way to do that is to try to become a bit more scientific, try to come up with an experiment, test it, learn from the results, and then throw away what doesn't work, keep what's good. I really hope that's been useful. I hope it was what you were expecting. If you want to talk more, I don't know how we're doing on time. Do we have time for questions? If anyone's got questions. Do you have time? Don't know. Well, so we do have time for one or two questions, if anyone's got them. If we run out of time, my stand's just over there, so please come over and talk. I'd love to hear what people are experiencing, and if you disagree with what I've said, please let me know as well, because that would be, we're trying to learn here. But yeah, anyone have anything to ask? There is a microphone there if people want. No.
Choice, we give too many people the choice now, and some people don't know what to do with the choice. Yeah, it's like if you want to come in, or it's your choice, and then people are like, should I come in, should I not come in? Sometimes if you say to people, we want you in 2 days a week, and it's good for their mindset to come in rather than just be stuck at home. But sometimes we give people too much choice and they don't know what to do with it.
So I'll come here so everyone can hear me. That is a really good point about there being too much choice, so people don't know what to do. At the risk of overselling my company and what I do, it was quite a nice sort of segue into that. But the problem that people are experiencing with that, in my experience, is it's not about the choice, it's about coordination. So it's about making sure that when you do work from home, everyone else in your team is also working from home, but when you go into the office, everyone else is in the office. Yeah, the main reason we found in the last couple of years that people don't go in is because when they were mandated to, they were the only ones in there, or they were the only ones in their team in there, and all they said was, "What's the point? There's no point in me. I commuted all the way in. I, may have had a lot of work on, and no one's here, so I'm not going to do it again." And so, if you want to talk to me afterwards, that's exactly what my company does. It's a tool to try to help people coordinate, so you can see what other people are doing, and that then becomes a team management thing. So in terms of the team requirements, if you can sort out when people need to go into the office as a team, then it's actually a pleasant experience. And that creates a pull of other people into the team. So if I can see that you go in on a Friday, for example, and you're my friend, and we go out for lunch or whatever, being able to see that you're going in will mean that I go in on the same day, and it becomes that sort of self-perpetuating cycle of that's the day that we go into the office. If that makes sense. Any other questions? No, great. You're free to go. Thank you for listening.